It is possibly the realization of our worst fears, the single most cunning and daring terrorist group in the world, being able to do more than bomb embassies, publicly execute journalists, and seek to overthrow governments. Now perhaps bringing down commercial aircraft with bombs in cargo holds. The political implications begin. 1 year to the election of president, less than 90 days to Iowa, and the nation has a decidedly red tinge to it tonight after stunning electoral victories over LGBT discrimination in Houston, marijuana use in Ohio, sanctuary cities out west, and who runs the show in Kentucky. Now, how should this benefit Republican POTUS candidates? One of those who wants to be president slams the hammer down, nailing it on addiction and pro-life. Why then did the media on both sides of the aisle fail to give Christie his due for an exceptional speech? And why does a dean of journalism still have a job after seeking to stoke racial tensions with one of the most blatant lies ever recorded by a police dash cam? Play this all back and astound your friends with the truth. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hardline for Wednesday, November 4th, 2015.
We have concluded that there is a significant possibility that that crash was caused by an explosive device on board the aircraft.
The game has now changed. Here in America, as politicians, billionaires, and doctors seek to become the next president of the United States, they will, from here on out, be forced to draw a focal point on terrorism, national security, and commercial planes falling from the skies allegedly due to explosive devices. The insults, counter-insults, and jokes started to fade when American intel earlier today suggested the crash of a Russian jet was likely caused by a bomb on board the plane, possibly planted by ISIS or an ISIS affiliate. Nothing is definite, but comments such as these are not going to be made lightly. The political ramifications and how this will change the fight to lead America, so let's get to work. Let's do that with former Deputy Assistant to Dick Cheney, now CEO of Christie Strategies, Ron Christie, joined by Republican strategist and contributor at the website ricochet.com, Rick Wilson. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us. And Ron, I'm going to begin with you. Knowing what we know now, and still this is not a definite, but all the reports coming in from the downing of that Metrojet flight, how does this then impact the political discussion here in America? Because you have to believe that the candidates are going to tread very lightly, but they have to come out and talk about terrorism.
Good evening, Ed. I think this really puts a very significant change in the political landscape here in the United States. For so many years, the Obama administration has talked about man-made contingency operations overseas, and they are unable or unwilling to use the term Islamic terrorism. Well, now it appears that we've had an Islamic terrorism attack on a very wealthy city, Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, on a flight headed back to St. Petersburg that has immense significance. What it means now, Ed, is that the Republicans will be able to draw and contrast themselves with whomever the likely Democratic nominee will be for president and say, we are continuing to fight the war on terror. Are you willing to call it for what it is and willing to do everything it takes to defeat these terrorists?
Rick, let's take it from there, because obviously Ron is correct. They are now going to have to talk more about intel, more about Islamic terrorism. But what's that line now that Donald Trump, Ben Carson, Hillary Clinton, and the others have to draw to make sure that they're not being seen as taking advantage of a horrendous situation?
Well, I think the most important thing here, Ed, is that they've all got to realize, and they've got to frame this conversation as one where we still live in a very dangerous world, and that the precipitous promises Barack Obama made to withdraw America from the world are having significant consequences now. They've all got to come up not only with a set of discussion points on these matters about what their solutions would be and about why we're at this point, but to also introduce it into a conversation that so far this year has been largely about issues that are not as consequential, are not as serious, and are not as front and center in the minds of the American public as they might well be, as if we see a sudden uptick in ISIS terrorist activities that can directly impact things like air travel and things like American interests overseas and as a whole.
Ron, would you believe now that what will happen, and again, working off all this, the president recently used the phrase boots on the ground. Remember, he once said we're not going to do it, but now we are doing exactly what everybody said would have to be done eventually. This is now a sticking point. Would you be shocked at all to hear all of the Republican candidates in the next 24 hours not go right at this and say, this is why we need to get in there. These are the mistakes we made, and this is what I would not let happen if I were president?
Absolutely, and Rick is absolutely right. This administration took its eye off the ball. We removed all the troops from Iraq before it was safe, before it was prudent to do so. And in that vacuum, you now have ISIS not only in Iraq, not only in Syria, not only in North Africa, but now you're talking about Asia as well. And the Republicans, all those folks who would like to be the next commander-in-chief and need to determine what is my plan, what is my strategy, how would I move forward, and contrast that not only with the failure of the Obama administration, but the likely nominee, Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State, and say she would be another 4 years of timid, weak U.S. foreign policy that we cannot tolerate, and the United States must reemerge as the preeminent leader in the world as our only remaining superpower.
I'm going to put you both on the spot here, and Ron, I start with you. Who is possibly the next commander-in-chief of the candidates out there whom you believe would be the best one to lead America when we have a terrorist attack such as this?
Well, without getting name specific, obviously, for having worked for Governor John Kasich for 7.5 years, I think he has the experience both on the Armed Services Committee as well as his time in Congress. But I think it's going to be a governor. I think it's going to be a governor who has been the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, someone who understands what it's like to mobilize the troops, someone who recognizes the immense responsibility with putting people in harm's way.
Rick Wilson, same question to you.
Look, I think that one of the things that's very evident about this field is there's no one in this field that would be worse than Barack Obama has been in the last 8 years. And I think that if you look at the leadership profile of a lot of these guys, you know, Marco Rubio has a very considered set of foreign policy positions. Jeb Bush has led this country in a variety, or led his state in a variety of extreme crisis situations, as has Governor Christie. And you have all these, you have a lot of guys in the field with a lot of assets in terms of how they would handle approaching this particular terrorist challenge more substantive and more effective than President Obama has in the last 8 years.
All right, let's go ahead and bring this home now to politics. A few minutes that we have left. On Tuesday night, huge victories for the Republicans across America. Here is White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest sharing some ideas as to why he and other Democrats seem to underperform in the off-year elections.
There are a whole lot of theories that have been proffered about why Democrats have not performed as well as we would like, either at the state level or in off-year elections. Some demographers have observed that Democrats are more likely to live in more densely populated urban communities, and that has consequences for drawing legislative lines. You know, in other cases, it's just that, particularly in off-year elections, that Republicans have been more effective in turning out their vote.
Oh, Ron Christie, look at this. Excuses, excuses. And I'll tell you what, the best one I think everybody heard is when the word came out that, oh, this happened because of Trump mania. Ron, the Democrats just got to take their medicine here. They got beat, and they got beat soundly. Why?
They got beat, and they got beat soundly. The current governor of Kentucky was one who embraced Obamacare. The current governor of Kentucky was one who embraced a lot of these environmental regulations. President Obama's approval rating right now, Ed, is about 70% disapproval. If you look at his, frankly, terrible record in a lot of these Rust Belt states and border states, there's no surprise on my part that Bevin won. But the bigger surprise, the one I'm happier about, is my home state here in Virginia. Terry McAuliffe failed to take over the state Senate. He put millions and millions and millions of dollars. They only needed one. The Republicans won all those seats last night. Why? Because the tax and spend failed policies of the Obama administration are a harbinger of what's to come for the Democrats next year if Republicans can field really good candidates.
All right, Rick, so what message then does what happened Tuesday night send to Democrats across America?
The message it ought to send them is that a lot of the things that they fundamentals to their 2016 campaign message are actually quite evident weaknesses for them. In Washington State and in Maine, you saw anti-tax and votes against taxes and against raising the minimum wage to $15. In Virginia, you saw a blowback on their gun control message that cost Mike Bloomberg millions and millions of dollars and led them to nothing. And in Texas, you saw an LGBT initiative that that embarrassed them, as they thought that they were going to have an endless string of victories on that question. So we're definitely in a situation where the Democrats have got an issue portfolio that is disconnected from the values of the American people, and it's harder and harder for them to win in places that aren't urban and coastal metropolitan areas, and that really showed last night. It's a real preview for what's to come in 2016, I think.
15 seconds, Ron. Don't you, though, hope that the Republicans are smart enough to take advantage of this? Doors open.
You can only hope so, Ed. You can only hope for the repudiation of these candidates across the country for their out-of-touch values. Yes, Republicans, if they get their act together, should do very well next year. Pay very close attention to what we saw last night.
And pay very close attention to what everybody does from here on out, because as we've all talked about over and over again, take advantage of what you've been given. Now we can see if they actually have the will to do that. Ron, Christie, Rick Wilson, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again real soon. Your government swears they're doing everything they can to increase cybersecurity for everyone. After the break, you're going to get a harsh dose of reality. It's next on The Hardline.